When I opened my eyes, the apartment was engulfed in dead silence. Only the wind raged outside the window, barely audible. The sky was covered with black, earth-like clouds. On such a day, all you can do is sleep and sleep. That's what I thought as I rubbed my eyes with my hands. And then a thought flew into my head. The wind, just like on that day. It was that thought that woke me up. In my mind, those very moments of my grandmother's death began to replay on their own. The image of that monster with a pig's head, and of course, my grandfather's story. That's when I realized why everything had come back to me. It was because I had spent the entire day yesterday thinking about going back there, seeing that monster again, and possibly unraveling the mystery of where it came from and why it kills people if you don't appease it. But there was one huge obstacle: my parents. They didn't believe me or the neighbors. At first, yes, when they learned about my grandfather's death and listened to the neighbors' stories, considering the shock, they were somewhat inclined to believe the real version. But then, as my mom said, they soberly assessed the situation and concluded that there was no pig monster, and that someone had just broken into the house and slit my grandfather's throat. They didn't even believe my grandfather, may he rest in peace, when he told them about my grandmother and that pig monster, how it ran off with her to God knows where. They gasped and sighed in his presence, but at home, they only said that either he had drunk too much, or he was senile. But I saw it all, and I know that what my grandfather said was the absolute truth, and what the neighbors said was also true. But who was I back then? A little kid with an overactive imagination. I hate that phrase. I decided to prove otherwise and find out the whole truth for myself. I had been obsessed with this thought since the day my grandfather died. Only that image, which I had seen so many years ago, flashed before my eyes every night as I fell asleep. And sometimes I would even wake up in a cold sweat, hearing that disgusting squeal in my head. That morning I woke up. It was 10 o'clock, but outside it was as dark as late evening. The wind bent the trees, forcing them to shed their leaves. I scratched my head, drank some water, got to my feet, and went to the bathroom. I freshened up and shook off the drowsiness by washing my face with icy water. By then I already knew what I was going to do that day. Yes, maybe this act was foolish, maybe by doing it, I would make my parents worry and push them to do something stupid, but my decision was final. The people closest to me, the ones who gave me life, didn't believe me. I intended to prove what had really happened, to figure it out for myself, to understand what it was and how to fight it. I gathered all the necessary things, prepared some food for the road, just in case, took a kitchen knife and my dad's air pistol. You never know what might happen there. Even if it wouldn't help, it would at least give me some confidence. I packed everything into my backpack and started writing a note to my parents. Mom, Dad, I'm going to Semyon's for the night. We'll play video games and maybe have some beer. You don't mind, do you? Here's his number, you can call to check. Love you, kisses. I wrote down my friend's number, whom I had already prepped. And he, in turn, had prepped his parents. And if they asked, I had pre-recorded a few phrases on a voice recorder, answers to the most common questions my mom would ask. I think I did everything right. I checked the time in my head. Well, God help me. I slung the backpack over my shoulders, took some money from the piggy bank for tickets, left the apartment, and locked the door. For some reason, I felt more confident than ever before. And then, standing in the hallway, I remembered my late grandfather's words. The pig monster attacks the weak. But I'm not weak, I have a knife and a pistol. Suddenly, such a stupid thought entered my head. I can fight this creature. And then I thought again, because my grandfather had shot it with a rifle, and it just got up and ran as if nothing had happened. Maybe it was already far away and not seriously wounded, I don't know. What am I even doing? I said it out loud, and my voice echoed through the hallway. Adjusting my backpack, I went outside. The wind was terrible, and it looked like rain was coming. I just hoped to get to the station without getting caught in it. I thought about it and headed for the bus stop. I got to the station quickly, and just as I arrived, a light rain began to fall. I bought a ticket for the suburban train. I didn't have to wait long, just about 20 minutes. I sat on a bench and drank a cola with the change from buying the ticket. I also bought a return ticket in advance. As soon as the train arrived, the announcement sounded, and I quickly ran out of the station building and jumped into the carriage. And so began my journey toward adventures that would stay with me for the rest of my life. I arrived quickly, probably in less than an hour. I got off the train. Here, just like in the city, it was raining. But that didn't scare me much. I headed toward our house. Fortunately, it wasn't far, and I didn't get too wet. In the yard, in such a short time, there was some kind of chaos. The door was locked, and all the windows were covered, even the one that the pig monster had once broken. I had taken the keys with me, and after inserting them into the lock, the door, with some difficulty, creaked open. Inside, it smelled of dust and old age. There was no trace of the former coziness or pleasant smell. Well, of course, now it was just an empty, uninhabited place. Nothing more, nothing less. I entered the veranda, and from under the rug, I could see that same pool of blood. Well, not a pool, but a stain that had never been washed away. I walked into the room and turned on the light. Fortunately, it hadn't been cut off yet. All the mirrors were covered with black fabric of unknown origin. I looked around, walked through the rooms. Everything reminded me of that day. Outside, a terrible storm began. The rain turned into a downpour. I decided to stay in the house for the time being, as in such weather even a bad owner wouldn't let his dog out. It was cold and damp in the house. But no matter, I lit the stove, and within an hour, the house became very warm. I took out the food from my bag and tried to heat it up, but suddenly I was drawn to a sound. I froze and listened. I turned my head toward the window. Outside, I saw only darkness and my own reflection. Quietly, I took the pistol out of my backpack and put it in my pants pocket. The sound was surprisingly clear, as if it were right inside the house. A cracking noise like someone breaking a stick. And no, it wasn't the firewood in the stove. I was standing right next to it, and the sound definitely wasn't coming from there. It got dark very quickly, and I felt anxious. I ate and sat in the room, waiting for the rain to stop. In any case, I wanted to go to the former pig farm and the animal cemetery. But that would have to wait until tomorrow, unfortunately. I lay down on the bed and closed my eyes. For some reason, I was overcome with fatigue, as if I had been unloading wagons all day. And so I fell asleep right there on the couch in the room, forgetting to turn off the light. That was probably my biggest mistake. The light had attracted it. I woke up to a terrible clap of thunder, so loud it seemed like lightning had struck right above the house. I jumped out of bed, my whole body shuddering, and stood up, rubbing my eyes. Suddenly, lightning struck again, illuminating half the yard, and yes, through the same window, standing in the same spot as I had as a child, I saw someone climbing over the fence. My heart sank, and I grabbed my backpack. I turned away from the window for just a moment, took out the knife and my dad's pistol. The one who had climbed over the fence was now standing where our flower bed used to be. Lightning flashed again, and thunder roared. In the light of the lightning, I saw it again. It was him. He had come back. And he was standing right in front of the house, about 8 meters from the window. My previous confidence evaporated, as if it had never existed. Once again, like in childhood, I wanted to curl up in the farthest corner of the room and close my eyes, thinking I was safe. The knife and pistol no longer seemed like such deadly weapons, and only one thought was running through my head: what the hell am I doing here? It was still standing outside in the pouring rain. Even through the new window, I could hear its disgusting grunting. Those sounds sent shivers down my spine, and I stood frozen, staring at it with wide eyes. I quietly reached for the light switch, realizing that I was completely exposed to it. But then something unimaginable happened. When I finally reached the switch and turned off the light, a fraction of a second later, I heard a guttural pig squeal and a blow to the window. It ran up to the same window and tried to break it, but no, there was a good plastic window now, not so easy to break. Nevertheless, the blows were so strong that a web of small cracks spread across the glass. It grunted and raged outside. I saw it up close again, saw its dead eyes, that damn pig's head, and those disgusting pig hooves instead of limbs. It drummed them against the glass, and the cracks spread further and further. I started to back away, and suddenly everything went quiet. I heard the sound of footsteps fading away, mixed with the terrible downpour. A strange and deeply unsettling silence fell. I wanted to go home more than ever. My hands began to shake, and my mouth was as dry as sugar. Still, I didn't take my eyes off the window, occasionally glancing at the other windows in the foolish hope that it wouldn't decide to run around the house and climb in through another old window. But in those seconds, nothing happened. I even thought that the cursed creature had left our yard. I pulled myself together and started to move, already planning my escape from the house I had once loved so much. But less than 10 minutes later, I heard a crash in the bedroom. My previous state returned instantly. I started shaking again, and my legs almost gave out under me. I rushed into the bedroom, and what I saw there horrified me beyond words. There, in the bedroom, lay the corpse of my grandfather, covered in dirt, already decomposing, full of worms. Wooden splinters, probably from the coffin, were scattered around. His head dangled as if it was about to fall off. It was a terrible sight, and I felt vomit rising in my throat. But I held it back and looked up. The window was smashed to hell. Shards of glass were scattered all over the room, and outside, right in front of the window, stood that damn pig. It was staring at me, but it didn't come inside. I raised the pistol, aimed directly at its eye, and pulled the trigger. A soft pop sounded, and the pig squealed like it was being slaughtered. The small bullet hit the creature right in the eye, and it began to thrash around by the window, squealing and holding its snout with its hooves. Feeling a surge of strength, I started shooting at it wildly, and for a second, it froze, and so did I. Then, it turned around, opened its mouth, and lunged at the window. I ran with all my might into another room. It was right behind me. I ran and heard the squealing right behind me, so close. I ran out onto the veranda and then outside, slamming the door right in the creature's face. I ran without looking back, and only later realized that it was chasing me. At first, I thought about waking up the neighbors in the middle of the night, but then I realized I wouldn't make it. And so, a few minutes later, I ran out of the village. There was no neat street anymore, no houses on either side. Just a field, and in the distance, a tree line. I ran across the field toward it. Thank God, I didn't hear any squealing or grunting behind me. I collapsed on the ground, exhausted. I lay there, gasping for air, which seemed to be in short supply. The rain was still pouring down, not even thinking about letting up. Mud, clay, water. I was covered in mud, lying under a bush, catching my breath. I didn't lie there for long, just until I heard that disgusting grunting nearby. It was back, God. Tears started streaming down my cheeks. I had no strength left to run. I didn't know what to do, but I knew it was close, and it wouldn't have any trouble finding me. It was walking very close by. I could hear its hooves stepping in puddles, the rustle of wet leaves on the bushes. Suddenly it emerged from the bushes right in front of me. Now there were no windows or walls between us, just a few meters of distance. It saw me and immediately started walking toward me slowly, as if knowing I had nowhere to go. But at the last moment, I remembered the knife and quietly pulled it out of my backpack, which I had miraculously managed to sling over my shoulders when I ran from the house. The pig monster approached me, and I was so scared that, honestly, I wet myself. I was face to face with the fear of my entire childhood, which turned out not to be a figment of imagination like all the other scary stories, but a terrifying reality. It came up to me and reached out its hooves toward my face. Without thinking, with trembling hands I gripped the knife tighter and pulling it from behind my back, struck with all my might, first at its hooves, then at its head, plunging the knife in. It squealed again and grabbed at the knife in its head, trying to pull it out. And I, fool that I was, instead of running, stood there and watched it writhe. Before I could even process what was happening, The pig monster pulled the knife out of its head and swung it, cutting my arm. I felt warm blood running down my arm and realized I had to run. Once again, gathering all my strength, I bolted. I ran through the tree line, crashing into bushes, slipping on the wet ground, which had turned into sticky mud. The blood didn't stop, and my arm was slowly going numb. I ran until the tree line ended, and a few meters later, the ground disappeared from under my feet. I rolled down some slope. I rolled for a long time. And apparently, while all this was happening, I lost consciousness. The slope was quite steep. I don't know why I passed out. Maybe I hit something. I don't remember. I only remember waking up when it was already light outside. I was half covered in mud. And I was lying in a puddle. My head hurt badly. I could barely feel my arm. But something caught my attention, even in that miserable state. Bones, mostly ribs, and some skulls, and ordinary bones. It dawned on me that I had ended up on that very animal cemetery my grandfather had told me about. The bones clearly belonged to livestock, and the place seemed just right for an animal cemetery. Yes, that's it. It's definitely it.